Welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. This is a podcast for male survivors of sexual abuse and assault, whether as a child or as an adult. Know that you are not alone and the abuse was not your fault. My name is Mike Chapman. I'm a certified recovery life coach and also a survivor. Let's find hope and healing together. Words matter. Today I want to talk about language and how we define our experiences of being sexually exploited by others. My friend Daniel Eichelberger, in a recent podcast interview on the No Longer Ashamed podcast, mentioned the term my abuser. And really, my implies ownership and gives the perpetrator more power over us by claiming, oh, he's my abuser. And he suggested a better term would be the person who abused me, or we could say something just the perpetrator, or simply the perp, instead of adding that my word to describe them. So instead of saying my abuser, saying the perpetrator or the person who abused me. Because, yeah, it gives them too much power, and that's really not healthy. I love that. So thank you, Daniel, for that. And that brings to mind other terms that I personally don't like for one reason or another, for one reason or another. Next word would be rape. I know describing my situation for myself using the term rape, I don't know. I don't like that. Other words that are used: sexual assault, sexual abuse, forcibly penetrated instead of rape. And I tried to understand, and I actually found this description online. I believe it's from the Bustle, B-U-S-T-L-E website. And it helped me understand why I didn't like that word rape. And they said, as Salon's Stephanie Hughes writes, if you go back to biblical injunctions, rape was considered a theft of property. The theft was that of a woman's virginity, which belonged first to her father and then to her husband. This biblical definition silenced women and made their rapes a crime not against them, but against their fathers or husbands. The word removed the victim's pain, experience, and testimony from the picture. Indeed, until the early 1970s, a woman was not considered a reliable witness about her own rape, but the defendant was. So, rape not only is more associated with a female, but it also devalues the effects on the victim. Sexual assault and sexual abuse seems to honor the victim more and clearly implies violence by the perpetrator. However, it can be very vague as well and can imply multiple types of offenses. Forcibly penetrated, if that applies in your situation, that implies that the perp's penetration of his genitalia or a foreign object into an orifice of the victim. So, though the term is more horrifying and therefore more triggering to hear, though sexual assault could include groping or fondling or touching and a myriad of other sexual violations above and beyond penetration. Next term is molester versus abuser, or molestation versus child sexual abuse, or molested versus sexually abused. Somehow molester, in my opinion, it glosses over the events. It also implies, in some jurisdictions, a single event, usually against a very young child, where child sexual abuse is more broad and, like sexual assault, properly implies a violent act. Other terms that, yeah, a little bit of a pet peeve when I hear these terms used in the media when describing minor teenagers as victims in sexual assault cases. They will say an underage victim versus a child, or children somehow lessens the severity of the crime. Oh, they were just an underage victim. Or underage women versus girls, or underage men or underage males versus boys. Oh, he had sex with an underage male. So he had sex with a boy. And the media, when they want to minimize the language and minimize the fact that, yes, this was someone doing something sexual against a minor, against a child, they will use those terms: underage victim, underage males, underage females. That somehow, by using the, instead of boys or girls or children, it kind of implies enough maturity and implying consent, or at least partial consent. Another term, child pornography. And this is commonly used, but in my mind, when I think of the child pornography, it implies consent of the child. I'm just thinking, imagining a little 7-year-old girl in heavy makeup and lingerie, smoking a cigarette, yelling to the director, "Hey, I need better lighting on my next close-up." But that's not reality. In reality, there's no consent present. These children have been groomed and manipulated to perform sex acts before cameras, assuming they're even awake. So many are sedated or drugged, either semi-conscious or completely unconscious. The preferred term now, instead of child pornography, is CSAM, which stands for Child Sexual Abuse Materials, CSAM. Child Sexual Abuse Materials, meaning anything that documents the sexual abuse of children, pictures, videos, etc. And that's much more appropriate and talks about the horrific nature and lack of consent of these things than child pornography implies. So words matter. What words or phrases do you dislike, and what should be a good replacement term for those, and why? Shoot me an email or respond via the contact section of my website. If you would like to learn more about my coaching with Polar Live Consulting, where I provide one-on-one coaching and group coaching, both with a focus on healing for male survivors, reach out to me at polarliveconsulting.com. That is Polar spelled P-O-L-A-R. I would love to hear from you. I want to hear your story. If you would like your story featured on this podcast, contact me via my website. If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find me, and I really want to spread this message of healing and hope to others. And remember, you are not alone. Healing is possible, and the abuse was not your fault. Let me repeat that. The abuse was not your fault. See you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast.